The 2012 NFL Draft was supposed to change the Cleveland Browns' fortunes. After years of futility and quarterback carousel madness, the Browns had the third overall pick and a chance to add a generational talent who could anchor their offense for a decade. That player was Trent Richardson, a running back from Alabama who seemed like the safest, surest thing in the entire draft class, a can't-miss prospect who carried all the pedigree and production you could possibly want. Richardson's journey to that draft position had been remarkable. Coming out of high school, he was a five-star recruit, one of the most highly recruited players in the entire country, with every major program in America wanting him to wear their uniform. He chose Alabama, and while his first 2 years in Tuscaloosa were solid, it was his junior season in 2011 that transformed him from very good to legendary. Richardson exploded for over 1,600 rushing yards and 21 touchdowns, breaking several Alabama records in the process. He finished third in Heisman Trophy voting and won the Doak Walker Award as the nation's best running back, cementing his status as a top-5 draft prospect. When the Browns selected Richardson third overall in 2012, the pick seemed obvious and logical. Cleveland desperately needed offensive playmakers, and Richardson had everything you look for in an elite running back: size, power, vision, receiving ability, and a track record of dominating at the highest level of college football. The expectation was that he would immediately become the centerpiece of Cleveland's offense, a 1,000-yard rusher who could carry the load and take pressure off whoever was playing quarterback that week. Richardson's rookie season with the Browns in 2012 was complicated. He rushed for over 900 yards and 11 touchdowns, numbers that looked respectable on paper, but that didn't tell the whole story. His yards per carry average was a concerning 3.6, well below the NFL standard for quality running backs. He showed flashes of the talent that had made him a top-3 pick, moments where his power and ability to break tackles created explosive plays, but he also showed troubling limitations. His decision-making seemed slow, his ability to find and hit holes appeared compromised, and he went down on first contact far too often for a back of his supposed caliber. Still, it was just one season, and rookie running backs often need time to adjust to the speed and complexity of NFL defenses. The Browns and their fans remained hopeful that Richardson would develop into the star they'd drafted him to be. But then, shockingly, at the beginning of the 2013 season, just 2 games into Richardson's second year, the Browns traded him to the Indianapolis Colts for a first-round pick. The reaction around the NFL was swift and nearly unanimous. The Browns had lost their minds. You don't trade a former top-3 pick after just 18 career games. You don't give up on a talented young running back before he's even finished his second season. The criticism was harsh and immediate. Cleveland was once again being Cleveland, making impulsive decisions, unable to evaluate talent, destined to remain in perpetual rebuilding mode. The popular narrative was that Richardson's struggles in Cleveland had more to do with the Browns' dysfunctional organization than with Richardson himself. The speculation was that Richardson just needed a better situation, better blocking, better coaching, better support, and he'd flourish into the star everyone knew he could be. The Colts seemed like the perfect landing spot. Indianapolis had Andrew Luck at quarterback, one of the brightest young stars in the NFL, which meant defenses couldn't stack the box against the run. They had competent offensive line play, solid coaching under Chuck Pagano, and were a playoff-caliber team that just needed a running game to complement Luck's passing attack. Richardson was supposed to be the final piece, the player who would make the Colts legitimate Super Bowl contenders. But almost immediately, it became clear that something was very wrong. Richardson looked just as ineffective in Indianapolis as he had in Cleveland, maybe worse. His yards per carry stayed stubbornly below 3.5. His inability to create explosive plays became more pronounced, and his decision-making looked even more compromised. He would run into the backs of his offensive linemen, miss obvious cutback lanes, and go down on first contact with alarming regularity. What made it particularly painful for the Colts was their stubborn insistence on continuing to feed Richardson the ball, hoping that volume would eventually lead to a breakout performance, that enough carries would allow him to find his rhythm and rediscover the talent he'd shown at Alabama. They kept giving him 15, 18, 20 carries per game, desperately wanting their investment to pay off, refusing to accept that the trade had been a massive mistake. But the breakout never came. Through 2 full seasons with Indianapolis in 2013 and 2014, Richardson was a complete liability, averaging just 3.1 yards per carry and providing nothing resembling the impact the Colts had envisioned when they traded a first-round pick for him. After the 2014 season, having seen enough, the Colts cut Richardson, eating the guaranteed money remaining on his contract and admitting defeat. And that was essentially it for Trent Richardson's NFL career. After being cut by Indianapolis, he never played another regular season game in the NFL. The trade that everyone thought was a catastrophic mistake by the Browns, giving up on a talented young back after just 18 games, turned out to be one of the savviest moves Cleveland had made in years. They had somehow recognized that Richardson wasn't what everyone thought he was, that the talent wasn't translating, that getting a first-round pick for him was better than watching him fail for 2 more years in Cleveland. The Browns had been right, and everyone who criticized the trade had been wrong. So the Browns had pulled off what seemed like highway robbery, trading Trent Richardson to the Colts for a first-round pick that would become the 26th overall selection in the 2014 NFL Draft. Cleveland had somehow convinced Indianapolis to give them premium draft capital for a running back who clearly wasn't working out, and now they had the opportunity to turn that pick into a franchise-altering player who could help end decades of futility and embarrassment. They'd cycled through quarterbacks for years, never finding stability or competence, watching other teams build around franchise signal callers while Cleveland kept searching. This was their chance, a first-round pick to invest in a quarterback who could finally break the curse. But the Browns being the Browns, they didn't just use the 26th pick they'd acquired from Indianapolis. They traded up, giving up additional draft capital to move from 26th to 22nd overall, all to ensure they could select the player they wanted. Johnny Manziel, the electrifying, controversial quarterback from Texas A&M. On the surface, Manziel's college career was spectacular, one of the most explosive and amazing careers in recent college football history. As a redshirt freshman in 2012, he became the first freshman ever to win the Heisman Trophy, throwing for over 3,700 yards and rushing for over 1,400 more, accounting for 47 total touchdowns and leading Texas A&M to an upset victory over Alabama. His improvisational ability, his scrambling, his knack for making impossible plays when the pocket collapsed, it was all mesmerizing to watch, and it made him a national sensation practically overnight. Manziel's individual accolades kept piling up. He won the Davy O'Brien Award, the Manning Award, broke numerous Texas A&M and SEC records, and became one of the most famous college football players in the country. His nickname Johnny Football captured his larger-than-life persona and his ability to do things on the field that seemed to defy the laws of physics and football strategy. But alongside the on-field brilliance came serious concerns, red flags that NFL scouts and analysts couldn't ignore. Manziel had developed a reputation for off-field trouble, for partying and immaturity, for not taking his preparation as seriously as a franchise quarterback needs to. Stories circulated about his lifestyle, about late nights and questionable decision-making, about a player who seemed more interested in celebrity than in the grueling work required to succeed at the next level. Even more concerning from a pure football perspective were the legitimate questions about whether Manziel's college success would translate to the NFL. He was undersized at just 6 feet tall and barely 200 pounds, significantly smaller than the prototype NFL quarterback. His throwing mechanics were unorthodox and inconsistent, with a release that looked more like a shortstop throwing to first base than a polished quarterback. And most damning of all, he never stayed in the pocket. His entire game was built on scrambling, on creating plays outside of structure, on relying on athleticism and improvisation rather than on reading defenses and delivering from the pocket like NFL offenses require. The Browns' own analytics department, the same smart football people who had correctly evaluated that Trent Richardson wasn't worth keeping, told the organization that Teddy Bridgewater was the best quarterback in the draft class. Bridgewater had the size, the mechanics, the pocket presence, and the mental processing speed that translated to NFL success. He was the safe, smart pick, the player their own experts were saying they should draft. But the Browns ignored their own analysts. The allure of Johnny Football, the excitement of his highlight reel plays, the pressure from fans and media, who were enamored with Manziel's star power, it all combined to push Cleveland into making the pick their analytics department had advised against. They traded up to 22nd overall and selected Manziel, betting that his college magic would translate despite all the warning signs. The results were disastrous from the start. Manziel barely played during his rookie season in 2014, appearing in just 5 games and starting only 2. When he did play, he looked completely overmatched and unprepared. His 18.0 QBR was one of the worst marks in the entire league. He completed just 57% of his passes for a pathetic 5.5 yards per attempt. Nothing about his game suggested he was ready for NFL football, not his decision-making, not his accuracy, not his ability to read defenses or go through progressions. The Browns hoped year 2 would bring improvement, that a full off-season and more preparation would allow Manziel to develop. The 2015 season brought more playing time. He started 6 games, but the results were just as awful, maybe worse. He looked like a player who was completely in over his head, unable to process what NFL defenses were showing him, still relying on scrambling and backyard football rather than executing within the structure of an offense. His completion percentage stayed in the mid-50s, his yards per attempt remained anemic, and his decision-making looked as poor as ever. But the on-field failures, as bad as they were, paled in comparison to the off-field disasters that kept mounting. The maturity issues that had been concerns before the draft became full-blown crises. Manziel entered a treatment program for substance abuse, a serious matter that should have been a wake-up call. Instead of buckling down and focusing on football, he was spotted partying in Las Vegas when he was supposed to be with the team preparing for games. He literally ditched his team responsibilities to spend time in Vegas nightclubs, showing a complete lack of professionalism and commitment. Then came domestic abuse allegations from an ex-girlfriend, serious accusations that included claims of assault and threatening behavior. The allegations were investigated, charges were eventually filed, and the entire situation created a public relations nightmare for Cleveland while raising serious questions about Manziel's character and behavior off the field. After just 2 seasons, having seen enough both on and off the field, the Browns cut Manziel following the 2015 season. The quarterback they had traded up to draft, the player they had selected despite their own analytics department's advice, the Johnny Football who was supposed to save the franchise, he was gone after just 2 years, having started a grand total of 8 games and having posted a 2-6 record with abysmal statistics and constant off-field embarrassment. And that was it for Johnny Manziel's NFL career. Despite being just 23 years old when Cleveland cut him, despite the Heisman Trophy and all the college success, no other NFL team gave him a legitimate shot. He bounced around briefly, tried the Canadian Football League and other alternative leagues, but never played another meaningful down of professional football in the United States. The trade that had started with such promise, turning Trent Richardson into a first-round pick, ended in complete disaster. Not only had the Browns wasted the pick on a player who couldn't play in the NFL, they had damaged their reputation both on and off the field, becoming a national punchline yet again. The Manziel era represented everything wrong with the Browns, ignoring their own smart analysts, chasing celebrity over substance, making impulsive decisions based on hype rather than evidence, and ending up with another failed quarterback in a long line of failures. The Browns had the information, had the right answer sitting in front of them, and chose to ignore it in favor of the flashy, exciting pick that their own people knew wouldn't work. The Trent Richardson trade had been brilliant. The Johnny Manziel pick turned that brilliance into yet another Browns disaster, proving once again that even when Cleveland does something right, they'll find a way to mess it up spectacularly.